allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any questions, discussions on any of the items? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Next up, we have Chief Deputy Jeff Thuland, Jim Doty, Scott Milner, and Greg Schultz. This is a resolution authorizing the chairman to sign the interlocal agreement between the County of Potawatomi and the City of Council Bluffs with respect to the 2022 Burn Justice Assistance Grant Program Award. Who wants to lead? Who's leading? Scott?
Yeah, it's the same grant we do every year. We just need a resolution between the city and the county to enter an MOU so we can actually apply for this grant. We'll split the funds 50-50 like we have in the past. This year's grant is a little over $54,000. The county buys whatever it is they need and we reimburse them directly back through that grant once we get the funds in hand. Those funds usually don't become in hand until January or February, just to the bureaucracy of how that works. Like I say, it's the same thing we've done every year for the last 12, 15 years.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second. Are the funds dwindling on that?
Actually, it went up this year, actually. Yeah.
What is the amount? Oh, you said 54?
Yeah, it's 54.2, 54.3, something like that.
All right, any other questions for any of our? All right, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Howell, you call the roll, please.
Chairman Wickman,
Aye.
Supervisors Belt,
Aye.
Groby, Schultz,
Aye.
and Shea is absent.
No, I'm on the phone.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Shea?
Hi.
Okay. You said Brian, I didn't know what Brian you were talking about.
Okay. All right, next up, Grant Anderson with MAPPA is not going to be with us today yet, so come up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion and decision to authorize the chair to sign the general accounting expenditure 16 for the Carson Macedonia project. Everybody have a chance to see the email Grant sent? Okay. Basically what it's doing is it's lowering the CDBG funds for that project from 61,000 to 35, and there'll be no more funding from the county. Okay.
Motion approved.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Hi.
See, that's the problem with saying opposed the same sign. So if somebody's on telephonically, there's a little lag. And he'll say aye to support it, maybe, or he says aye.
He supported it.
Right, I'm sure he did.
I
But
support it.
okay, but that's the problem with saying opposed same sign. You're not.
You know what, that's the way I've done it for.
I know it. I'm not going to change Mr. Wickman,
All right, thank you
but
very
you just
much.
have to pay attention when somebody's on the telephone.
And Melvin, can we get the overhead and print screen on, please?
Yeah.
Next up, we have Paula Hazelwood with Advanced Southwest Iowa, Shalimore Mazzettis with Advanced Southwest Iowa, Bethany Wilcoxon with McClure. This is a discussion only on, that's correct, right?
Correct.
Discussion only on the Potawatomi County infrastructure collaboration. With that, Paula, I'll turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Good morning. We're back again to give you an additional update on the Potawatomi County Infrastructure Coalition and the status. We're in a really, I think, cool position right now. There's a lot of work that's been done on the background to get to this point. It's kind of a pivotal point. And so I am going to ask you guys to do something at the end, but not approve anything today. So, as we've gone through, we've been back in front of the supervisors numerous times with updates. We have funneled everything down to the 4 projects that we feel are most impactful, will be most impactful for the county. When we were here last time, we really didn't have kind of what that match component, what we're asking the county to match with ARPA funding. And so the McClure team has strategically worked very hard to get to that point. Now, as we are going through this, you'll see there are still gaps in each project. Each and every one still has a gap. And Bethany and Gary will kind of talk through that as we go. That does not mean that we're done looking for additional capital stack to go on top of it. But we feel we have really good numbers put in place where we can now come back to you, and this is the part that I'm going to ask and actually volunteer to draft a resolution that officially allocates the ARPA funding to these 4 projects. Now, as we're also going through this, I want you to have a mindset of not the projects individually, because we only have a short window to utilize this funding. And so these projects, what's good for Crescent is good for Trainer. What's good for Trainer is good for Oakland. It's really about the holistic approach for the county and what the impact of these 4 infrastructure projects are going to mean. And I know Supervisor Schultz and I have had a couple conversations about, there are some other projects that are sitting out there that did not make the list. That does not mean we're not going to continue to work on each municipality's benefit to try to unearth additional resources for them. Matter of fact, we got one. The city of Carson obviously needs a new fire truck, and so, or ambulance, and so we got some additional information that was passed down. Shalimar has sent that to them just earlier this week. So we will continue to do that. But I'm going to turn it over to Gary and to Bethany, and as they walk through that, please keep the mindset of, really this is an impact for the entire county. It's not about each individual project. It's the totality of it. So with that, do you guys have anything you want to add to that?
No, thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you, Paula. Good morning. Good to see you all again. My colleague Gary here is our Vice President of Water. Thought we would bring him along today since we are talking water projects. So he'll be diving into some of our specifics. Mitch, if you can jump to our next slide, or do you want me to take the mouse? So I don't have to have you be Vanna White. So again, reminder, we have the 6 priority projects that came out of the initial discussions with Golden Hills that happened last summer, around 200 projects that we've whittled down to these 6. Across those, about $12.4 million in total. Oops, maybe I shouldn't be allowed to run that. So,
We need you back.
yeah.
Went bye-bye altogether.
Yeah, it's not what we wanted.
No, this isn't what you want. That's the agenda.
So what we'll get into here is looking at the $1.5 million that the county has preliminarily set aside for the ARPA project, or the projects here from your ARPA dollars. Mitch, if you want to go to this next slide. Gary, I'm going to let you handle that.
Hey, Brian.
So,
Just the button.
a number of ways that we could slice and dice this project funding, but just a quick reminder here of estimated total project amount in the first column, and then the percent of that total $12.4 million there on the right. So really a wide range. Some of these projects, as you may recall, are a little bit further along. They have that preliminary design and engineering work done. They've got their documentation into the state, whereas some of them are ideas at this point. Some of them don't even have that preliminary engineering done, so they're very much ballpark estimates. But looked at all of this and thought about how can we allocate this $1.5 million. This is a starting point for discussion. Again, number of ways that this could be divided up, but how can we make this as equitable as can be? So, Gary?
Just ignore the wheel. Just use
The wheel.
Oh. The wheel.
Gunshine out. So what we did here to make it as equitable as possible, took that percent of total project need of that $1.5 million. There we go. And this is the initial recommended county support that you'll see here. So ranging from $12,000 on up to $700,000 to get to that $1.5 million. So again, one way that we could slice and dice this, but with that, Gary, I'm going to ask you to get into the funding specifics, we looked at not only county funding, the potential local match funding, but then also what other funding sources are out there. So with that, Gary, you want to dive into specifics for each community?
Sure, and then just real fast before we move off of this slide. So taking it all the way back to when I think all the cities, or many of the cities I should say, came to a meeting we had in Oakland some time ago already.
November.
Just to kind of talk through like what is the plan here related to kind of the efforts, the contribution that the county is making and investing in these communities and into the county, but also like what is the kind of the approach and the need. And as Bethany kind of talked about, and this is very common with this kind of work. And so water, when we say water, we do water, wastewater, stormwater at McClure. And so when you're dealing with those kind of projects and those kind of utilities, it's oftentimes kind of a multiple assets, multiple funding sources really help to make up the kind of the financial approach, not necessarily the technical side, but the financial approach to these kinds of projects. Oftentimes it comes from grants and loans, city coffers, et cetera, et cetera. Fortunately, we have these ARPA dollars. It's a kind of a one-time commitment from the federal government that's come down to the local entities as well. And so that provides us another opportunity. But oftentimes it ends up being kind of a layered approach, if you will. And we talked about that at that meeting. And that's really what we're kind of recommending as part of this as well. The ARPA dollars that the county's making available is essentially one of those layers. So again, back to the 6 projects we've talked about. In this case, we'll talk about first here, Carter Lake. I think there's a representative from Carter Lake in here today. This is a project related to some water main replacement along with some metering and other things that the city has identified as an important project. They're one of those communities that's a little farther along as far as that list of 6 that's identified there. Again, what we did is maybe going back one slide here real fast again. Looking at this, we looked at from a county's perspective, again, it being one of those pieces, one of those layers. Some of those often the other layers, the loan, other grant sources that might be out there, they have different views as it relates to how they have analyzed these kinds of projects. From the county's perspective, we know you've made this contribution available to these communities. We looked at it more from, again, we're trying to benefit the whole county. We've pared down those 200 projects to these 6 are the most, essentially fit the bill of the ARPA dollars, plus we feel that it provides the best benefit as far as when the projects are ready to move forward. And so what we simply did was we took a look at that 1.5 million, these 6 projects in total, the requested overall amount, the cost of those, if you look at that, that's the percentages that you see here to make it as equitable as we possibly could across that as far as how we're layering in the county's portion. But again, Carter Lake, that's there. The recommended allocation from the county, we anticipate, so the state has received a lot of additional funds as well. A very common source of funds from the state is what's called the SRF program, the State Revolving Fund. That covers drinking water. It also covers wastewater or clean water SRF. And there even is some stormwater related funds that are out there as well. But we're focusing on water and the drinking water program in this case. And we anticipate that, again, this is an assumption, but depending upon, there's a matrix that you have to go through. But we believe that likely the city may be eligible for some additional what they call forgivable loan dollars. And so we're representing 10% there. It could be higher, it could be lower. But with the information that they have made available to us at this point in time, we think it's a very relatively safe or conservative assumption that they're going to get some SRF loan forgiveness dollars as part of this effort. And then we know that there's maybe the potential for some additional local match dollars that are out there as well for the city of Carter Lake.
Can you stop right there?
Correct. Sure.
Mayor Cumberledge, is that something that the city of Carter Lake can work with?
Yes. Awesome. Okay.
And I would note on the SRF loan forgiveness that matrix is slated to be finalized in September. So it's in process right now.
So we're working off of kind of a draft, even at this point in time, from the state on what their matrix for what that forgivable loan matrix is going to look like. And so we're making assumptions partially there as well too. But what you see then here is that you have about $1.3 million left, assuming all these things happen. The county's contribution, the SRF loan forgiveness dollars, and then the potential for some other local match dollars that we believe may be available as well. And that leaves about a $1.3 million gap. And that's coming from then the city at that point in time is coming with that portion of the contribution. And that's typically coming through things like, again, the SRF program. There's also the USDA rural development programs that are out there. There's CDBG dollars that may be available depending upon the financial need of the community. And so again, it kind of gets into that conversation of really it's a layered approach at this point in time to make this number here, this $1.3 million number. Obviously the goal is to make that as low as we possibly can to make these projects as affordable as we possibly can for the members of that community. So that's what we've kind of identified there. If you look at really what you're seeing, about 12%, so this county contribution that we are recommending here of $242,000 represents about 12% of the overall anticipated project cost. These project costs were provided by the entities themselves. And then if you look at overall, when you look at the amount of money that we believe may be available through the county, that local match, and then the assumptions related to that SRF program that's out there, is about a third of the project that we believe we may be able to buy that cost down for those community members. Does that make sense? You're gonna see the same theme as we go through these other projects as well. Okay, so I'll move on. Crescent, similar situation here. Theirs is a little bit larger project. Theirs is a regulatorily required project. They've received a new wastewater NPDES permit. And so the city has gone through the preliminary engineering report. I know they've just started the design process as well, have concurrence from DNR, and they're one of the more advanced communities as far as like how far down the line are they. But again, the county allocation, we're again assuming that 10% SRF loan forgiveness, the potential local match, and we're anticipating this one to be a bit higher. Again, they're being regulatory required to move forward. This is assumed to be a grant fund, and that oftentimes gives them maybe more priority points in that process. So we're assuming that they may have essentially a better case to make, if you will. And that's so we're representing about a $500,000 local match as well. And then this program here is called the WTFAP grant. Now, again, this is a competitive process. We can't guarantee the city that this is going to happen, but we've been successful with other communities in assisting communities like Crescent under similar situations in applying for and maybe receiving funds for this. Could be higher, could be lower, but the average of that program is about $350,000 actually, so we're being, again, a bit conservative here. But it's specifically for water treatment and wastewater treatment related financial assistance. It actually comes from the state. It's a relatively new grant program that has come out. But again, that's something we're going to recommend to the city to pursue. And we think that they have a good case for that as well because of the regulations that they're being required to implement this. So we're representing even that at this point in time. The bottom two, really the bottom three, I would say, obviously if the county were to provide the contribution we're recommending, those are competitive. And so we can't guarantee those are going to happen, but we think that there's a good likelihood. So that's why we're representing what we're representing here today. Again, about 12% county funding in this case. If they were to receive these other funding sources, we believe we can get about 40% of that project cost that's anticipated at this point in time paid for.
So do you represent Crescent at this point?
McClure is the design engineer for Crescent. That's a great point. We should mention that. We should mention that.
Yes, and Crescent's aware of these numbers and they're fine with the bottom line.
Correct. Crescent knows of the anticipated project costs, and they know what we have identified as far as potential funding sources. Those layers like we talked about before.
So I have a question. I mean, I don't live in Crescent, but I'm pretty close to Crescent. And I guess I'm really cautious looking at that roughly 2.4 number. I don't know how they make that up. I don't know how they can't levy that. This is impossible to levy that and have them pay for it.
It's a good question. Typically, what you're going to use some of those funding sources we talked about before. So like the SRF program provides a 2% interest loan for 20 up to maybe even 30 years, depending upon financial need. There's also the USDA program is another commonly used program that allows you to term the interest out for, the term length of the program out to up to 40 years. But you're right, there's no doubt about it that the utility is going to have to increase rates to cover the cost of this program.
I'm not trying to sharp shoot you either.
Yep.
The other thing here is that this brings them to what they're required to be as far as compliance. This does not allow for big growth. So I'm a little concerned about that as well. We get them up to where they have to be for state requirements, but then all of a sudden we want to build a couple new neighborhoods there. Is there enough capacity with what we're trying to do here to have that happen? I mean,
To allow for growth?
Yeah.
Yeah, there is some allowable growth within the overall project. Typically, DNR requires. I'm not the project manager on that one, but I can certainly get you, Supervisor Schultz, I can get you the information on what growth assumptions are in there. But we're required by the state to include, typically, it matches the term length of the loan. So a 20 or 30-year growth rate that we would be including into that analysis. And that's something we worked with the city on. What does that growth rate look like?
I'm being full disclosure,
Yep.
this really makes me nervous, this one, for sure, because there's a ton of potential for growth there. And if we build this, even if we do a 30-year note, 40-year note, whatever, I just worry that we can't make up the tax base to pay the bill. And that is a substantial amount of money for not a lot of residents there, so
There's it's a great comment. It's something that, especially around metro areas, a lot of these smaller communities that are in kind of a unique position for growth when you look at the makeup of the state of Iowa. That can provide challenge, certainly. It also provides opportunity, because along with that typically comes tax base, obviously additional user revenues. The other thing I would mention too is, and this is something that we can assist the city with as well, is the opportunity for, as you plat new developments, the potential for connection fees and other things that can help buy down some of those costs as well. And so, I'm not trying to mask anything here. It's a big challenge that the city is facing, that all these cities are facing. Infrastructure costs are going up significantly. Inflation has hit, obviously, it's double digits for certain industries. It's extremely high in the construction market right now. That's labor, that's materials and everything. And so it's certainly a challenge. Certainly a challenge.
thank you.
You bet. And so again, that's just highlighting the anticipation for assuming these other things happen, these layerings happen. This is the kind of what we would anticipate for then that note or that loan to happen, as far as whatever the funding source ends up being. Likely SRF in this case is what we anticipate for Crescent, but those additional funds that the city is going to have to come forward with, and it's typically again through a combination of loan and grant funds. Hancock's a little bit farther behind some of those other ones at this point in time. They know they need to do some water tower repairs. The DNR has identified that they believe there may be a leak in one of their lagoon cells or wastewater treatment facility. And so they need to do some work there to analyze that and understand there's some study work that needs to be done. They've come forward with what they believe as far as the overall cost of the project they anticipate between those two things. And so again, using that same percentage of overall project cost as it relates to that all total capital investment for these 6 projects. And then we anticipate some local match funds that may be available as well. And in this case, we think that really this is to help. This local match, we anticipate, would really help them to analyze. Yet the water tower obviously is a really important asset for the city, but also to do the necessary planning work. As far as the kind of the gap between those, there's also a program through the SRF that allows the city to, it's called a planning and design loan. And all cities, basically, this kind of work would be covered underneath of that. It allows cities to access funds from that SRF program at 0% interest for up to 3 years in order to do the necessary planning and design work that then would lead to what that long-term solution is as well. And so with that gap and if there's any shortage related to maybe that local match, that would be anticipated to be utilized underneath that SRF planning design loan program. It doesn't mean they don't have to pay it back, but again, it allows them essentially that funding up front, so they don't have to necessarily worry as much about their immediate budgets to cover those burdens related to determining what the best long-term cost-effective solution is.
Are you needing to enlarge the lagoons?
Potentially. Again, with that lagoon evaluation, what they believe there may actually be underneath that lagoon cell, there's typically like a clay or bentonite layer that's underneath of there that prevents the water from seeping through and into the groundwater. And they believe that there may actually be a leak in the cell. The DNR believes that. So there's an analysis that can be done. It may not necessarily be that they have to enlarge it. It may mean that they have to reset the liner if there truly is a leak in the liner, or replace it with a geotextile membrane. Typically, those are the two common sources of addressing that problem.
So it kinda looks like it's adequate now.
Potentially, I don't know enough
And
about.
they did some work when they put the new, water pump there at Hancock, when they did the bridge new.
So yeah, there's typically, there's a kind of prescribed process that you have to go through to determine whether or not there's an allowable seepage through DNR. You just have to determine whether or not you're within that allowable limit, basically. And so if not, there's a couple of different options that may be there. So.
Thank you.
Yep. McClelland, it's a water distribution improvement study. They've had some kind of low water pressure issues in the community for quite some time. And this really, the request here is to do kind of, again, that upfront planning work to determine what options may be available to the community to help them with their, really with their water distribution system. And so most of this is, again, one of the communities that's a little farther behind as far as the overall shovel readiness for a project, if you will. But there's need to actually do some analysis to understand what are the options in front of them, what's cost effective for the community. And that's where a lot of the funds here are allocated to. So again, the county, the local match we anticipate, and then again, that planning and design loan program would be very ideal for a community like this. Obviously, they also receive water from Regional Water, one of those communities as well. And so it would likely involve some coordination and maybe even some work by the regional utility as well. It would just, you need to do that analysis work to really determine kind of what are the next steps and what's most cost effective for that, really that whole region of the county. Again, being that they are serviced by a regional water supplier.
And Gary, this study is in fact required by DNR, correct?
Yeah, I mean, if they were going to do some sort of improvement, they would have to go through this analysis, especially to access any of those potential funding sources, whether that's again through, maybe it's a regional water project that's there to benefit not just McClellan, but other areas of that rural distribution area that regional water serves. Or maybe it's just specific to McClellan, but there's probably an opportunity to maybe even benefit multiple areas of the county beyond just the city of McClellan as well. So,
I mean, it has to be a regional water project.
Yeah.
It absolutely does.
Yeah,
So
they don't have their own water tower, if you will. And so this would be something that, is there some way to improve pressures in the community, whether that's specific just to McClellan, or likely is it improving areas of the county as well, so.
And Gary, you may not know, but he's actually the mayor of.
Oh, very good. I did not know that.
Yeah, because I didn't think he did, so I just wanted you to know that.
Minden's identified the need to do some water main replacement in the community. Like many small communities, older communities, a lot of the distribution mains are very small, typically 4-inch diameter, old cast iron water mains. And not uncommon of the age of when this went in. DNR requires, for fire flows and other things, that it would be 6-inch main. They typically degrade over time, and so this is really a project that they've identified that they want to improve, water conveyance within the community, pressures, flows, et cetera. And that's what this is based off of. They've identified about $225,000 worth of water main improvements that they would like to move forward with. And so that's the project here. Same kind of breakdown, assumptions of cost. The SRF program would be able to help them again, both with the planning and design, and also the long-term loan side of things, in addition to the potential for other funding sources. USDA and others may also be an applicable source of funds for the community. So,
Are they rural water?
Minden, I don't think they are. I think they have their own system, yes.
And the Industrial Foundation is up and running and should have its 501c3 bidding of the year. And they've recently purchased land to actually build some new homes in Minden as well, so.
And then the final one of these, and this is very similar again with like Crescent, they're very similar projects in that the city is being required to meet some new effluent limits at the wastewater treatment facility. So it's going to require some pretty significant upgrades for the community. It's a long-term investment for them. And so again, just looking at these potential opportunities that are there, we're anticipating, again, the potential for loan forgiveness. They've actually, and last year, I believe, they were able to apply to that WTFAP program we talked about with Crescent, and they were able to receive a $300,000 grant as part of that overall project, helping to buy down the costs there. And then we're representing some additional local match funds, again, very similar to Crescent in the fact that, again, they're being regulatorily required to improve their wastewater treatment facility. Another community that I think has kind of similar to what your questions were before, some growth potential for the community. And we want to make sure that this provides long-term benefit and supports that growth of the community. So certainly something that I think not just the county, but the local match money would be really important to making those rates, the utility rates, as equitable as possible and as financially feasible for the community members to pay for it. So that's what we've tried to represent here.
Okay, Michael, you saw those numbers. I think the last time you were here, I asked you where you were at with your funding on that. Do you have most of the funds secured for that?
The funds, and when we talked about this, where you looked at those numbers, I mean, we have the SRF and we have all that financial, because we're already in the process of going forward. So yeah, it's secured in the terms of loans. We've already applied for the grant, as you saw, the $300,000, that was last year. And we're looking at some other funding sources, including what we have in some of the reserve to try to take down any cost that we've got. So now it's just a matter of how do we get that from the rates that for the customer to as low as we can. I mean, we anticipated as high as $100 and some per customer, and currently they're at 20. So we're trying to hover around that $50 to $75 mark per customer on that rate. That was our goal all along. So we just had our kickoff meeting. They call it, engineers call it, the 10% kickoff meeting on July 7th. So, you know, we're going down
You're in the
road.
design phase,
Yep.
You're on the intended use plan with SRF and.
That's all in, and
Yep,
that's
yep.
all, you know, pretty well, none of it's done. It's just, it's in that line, and as we do the timeline of when it needs to go into place, and each month is a different timeline as the engineers pull us through this and try to get it taken care of. And we're working with Spear Financial and Maggie Berger, and so everybody's on the same page. So every bit we look at is a bonus, is a plus, is a thank you. And to your question about growth, we a year and a half, 2 years ago, when I first came on, anticipated. We looked at the housing study that was fresh off the press. I did a land use study to see where we would be at in Trainer with another engineering, Ulteg. I'm equal opportunity kind of guy. And so we looked at all the different factors in the land that we had on this wastewater, which is required. So we went with the Lemna technology. I think we talked about this the last time I was here. The Lemna technology allows us to look at that at a 1,500 residents customer base in Trainer to double. We are able to go to 3,000, knowing that if it goes skyrocketing above 3,000, we're going to be in a different ball field, different technology, different, anything that gets above 3,000 this type of stuff would not even be considered. It would be probably sludge and some of that type of mechanical facilities. And so yes, we did anticipate the growth to double, and we're looking at 3,000 in that 20 to 30 year period of the life of this technology.
So you're at 3.8, that's the quote city's responsibility. You've got that covered, Michael?
Yes.
Underneath assumed loans from SRF or another funding source,
Agreed.
something of
I
that
have
nature.
to say that with the caveat that it's all assumptions, but yes, that is where we're going forward with the idea that we will be secured.
I'll quickly soapbox this real fast. It's never been a more challenging time to estimate project costs. There's a shortage in labor force. The material costs have absolutely skyrocketed. I'm sure you've all read things about the price of lumber, the price of steel, the price of electrical components, the material availability issues related to COVID pandemics and storms and other things that have put those very, we have materials that we are waiting on more than a year. We just approved a shop drawing for a new generator, and they quoted it was 60 weeks out before we would actually see it on site. I mean, it's never been this challenging before. And so from the perspective of cities that are moving forward with projects at this point in time, the faster we can get to market when we have double-digit inflation rates, the better off we possibly can be. And so certainly additional funding sources make that much more palatable, I guess is maybe a nice way of saying it, for the customer base. But the sooner that we can have that allocation identified, a lot of these other funding sources, SRF, other grant sources, et cetera, they have time frames that they have to have identified. And so we don't really have time to wait around necessarily, sometimes to go a second go around, if you will. We're at a point in the market right now where you say, let's say the CDBG program as an example, they typically have certain times where you can apply and receive the funds. It may not make financial sense to wait around if you don't get it this time to try to get it a second time, because that time to market, you may actually have lost all of the grant fund potential that's there just because of the escalation of prices we're seeing. Now it could change tomorrow. We could have a recession and things might revert back, but based on what we know today, the sooner we can get to a bid point, typically the better off we are, because at least we know what we can control at that point in time. So I'll get off my soapbox now.
And
It's a challenging environment.
And we were forewarned. I mean, there's in all these projects, and everyone, Crescent, we look at that included as the inflationary. When we came back in July, the inflationary, what do you want to call it? The way the monthly setup, we know it's another 150,000 probably per month as we keep waiting. So when we talk 5.829 now, we know at bid time that could be 6.1, 6.2, 6.3 and rising. So, and bid time is this fall. I mean, we're headed that road.
So to summarize here, just want to reiterate the recommended county support here for each of the projects totaling that $1.5 million. Total project costs just shy of $12.4 million. And then again, trying to be as equitable as possible, maintaining those percentages of the whole project needs as well as the corresponding county support numbers as well. I would note average capital stack, we're about 48.2% of the projects. And then total, we've got about 4.64 million of the 12.39 identified. So that's about 37.5 million, or 37.5%, excuse me, of funding that we're able to identify and really buy that down for the local communities.
You have 12.3 identified. What do you have?
4.64 identified of the 12.4.
Is that on the side here?
No, that is not. So that's 37.5% of the full amount that we can buy down that the local communities won't have to worry about.
And again, some of those, we're making some assumptions based off of the information from SRF as far as how they're preparing their loan forgiveness program. Some of that's not finalized. So we're still making some assumptions. There may be even more gap that's there. It's possible there's less gap if some of these communities have a financial need and can show that the need is greater than that 10% assumption. Well, we're doing the best we can with the information and where we're at with all those different programs today to try to represent what the overall financial need for these communities are. From the perspective of, speaking on behalf of city managers and mayors of these kind of communities, the more financial assistance that can be provided and guaranteed, obviously, the better at this point in time. We're trying to represent and be somewhat conservative. It could be a rosier picture than we're showing. At the same time, conversely, it may be even a little bit more burdensome than we're showing as well too. We just don't have, based on where some of those programs are and some of them are competitive, we don't have the answer until essentially we're given the answer at that point in time, if that makes sense.
We are certainly anticipating and want a rosier picture than 10%. We don't know what the distressed community, that language has not been completely solidified. So, right now Crescent and Trainer are not in some of that distressed community levels, but we think they will be. So we're hoping.
There's more than just simply looking at the median household income. There's, again, regulatory issues, environmental benefits. That's that matrix we were talking about, and it's not finalized. We assume it's probably fairly close with the draft of what they've provided. But again, there's information there that we just don't have with 100% certainty. So we're anticipating it's supposed to come out in September, but I think it was actually supposed to come out a little bit earlier this year before too, so.
It's supposed to come out, what,
Knock on wood, it
May?
comes soon. So. Hopefully that provides a better background or understanding of kind of what we're recommending, from the perspective of, the contribution that the county is willing to make to the residents of the county, and I'm happy to try to answer any other questions that maybe you didn't ask during the slideshow.
I have a few, but I'll let these guys go first. Okay. The state requirement on the lagoon systems for Crescent and Trainer, why doesn't Minden fall in that same?
It depends on when they get a new wastewater NPDES permit. It's based off of several things. Oftentimes it's based off of the receiving stream, size of the community, what other kinds of maybe industrial contributions happen in the community. It's different for each community. And so when that comes, will Minden be required to maybe make some improvements in the future? Like, the likelihood is yes, but I can't answer exactly when that's in process from a DNR perspective.
What is the existing length of a permit then?
Well, it's 5 years. Many of them are running on what's called an expired permit, and some of those are beyond 10 years. So the length of a new permit they go in 5-year renewal cycles. But some of them, knowing that there were new regulations, EPA regulations that were coming down to the state, those are in an expired status, but essentially you run underneath of that old permit until you're given a new one. So I can't speak for exactly what Trainer was seeing, but I'm guessing that they had an expired permit oftentimes for more than 5 years before they got a new permit, when they were given theirs within the last probably 2 or 3 years.
Before I ever came to Trainer, it was already expired, so.
You just keep right on going down.
You run under the old permit
Sort of.
until a new one is given,
But
basically.
you are under a regulatory, if you don't do something with DNR and go into a plan of action, they will start with the administrative fining and penalties, even expired. You're given X amount of time to fix it. And when I arrived, it was already under that fix-it status. So that's where the process started back in 2020.
You're given a new permit. Within that permit, there's a compliance schedule that's identified to do the planning, the design. There's kind of interim milestones that you have to hit until you meet that eventual compliance. So what compliance means is you're given a regulatory or a limit, an effluent limit that you must meet on that discharge side of the wastewater treatment facility. The old facility was not capable of meeting those new discharge rules, and that's what that compliance schedule identifies. You have to meet then by that final date. And there's interim milestones you have to meet along the way. So Trainer, Crescent have that today. Are other communities in the county facing something similar today or in the future? Yeah, probably.
You asked about Minden, and I can tell you, talking with Kevin, it's coming.
Yeah.
They will be under probably regulatory to fix it when they have that permit status and when they finally do expire.
As the rules change, you would think the state would kick in a little
more funding to those smaller towns to help them do that, but that's for another day. Bethany, you mentioned that you will have all of the numbers and everything pulled together in September? Is that what I heard, September date for something?
So the disadvantaged community for the SRF loan forgiveness, that will be finalized in September. It's open for public comment right now. So the matrix is around 15 different elements. Usually they just look at median household income, but they're opening that up. And I think one thing, Gary, jump in here, but for Crescent especially, looking at the ability for the community to pay, because we know, to Supervisor Schultz's point, the community is so small, it's a big number, so what that impact would be for rates. So that is one component that's being considered as well as part of that overall look. Anything you would add?
Yeah, the short of it is the analysis is more than simply just financial, although that's a major piece of it, but it looks at other contributing factors as they look at that overall, what they call it, a disadvantaged community matrix is what it's called. And so they look at more than simply just the financial need, but that's a major piece of it. But they look, again, specifically at median household income of the community, amongst other things, what is the overall average bill anticipated to rise to for that utility? And they look at it separately. It's not just a water or sewer, each one, a lot of times you think of a water bill that has, recycle and garbage and all those things on it. It's an enterprise entity at that point in time that's run under the utility. And so they look at necessarily water maybe a bit differently than just simply a water bill, water, wastewater, stormwater, et cetera.
So I know you're aware, Bethany, that the funding for ARPA needs to be spent by 2026.
End of 2026, allocated by end of 2024.
And you feel confident that we can close out these?
I'm going to turn that one over to Gary, our water expert.
Similar to where Trainer's at, I know we've just recently been retained, McClure has, by Crescent, again, we're their engineer. And so we have started that design process on their wastewater improvement as well. That typically takes about 12 months to go through that, along with regulatory reviews, maybe a bit less, maybe a bit more than that, just depending upon how quickly you can get through that permitting process. So there's the design and permitting process, then obviously bidding and construction after that. As of right now, I think it's very achievable. If the market conditions continue to be very challenging, we could be bumping up on that 2026 date and not too far along down the line, just because of material availability and other issues that we're running into. Many projects are taking almost double the time just because of the shortage and availability of materials to just source and bring to the site. So I don't have perfectly clear vision through the binoculars, but it looks like as of right now, I think that, based on where we're at today, that those dates are achievable.
But to Paula's point earlier, the sooner we can get these funds identified and committed for the communities, the sooner we can get those rates really locked in and move forward with all the planning and design.
I talked about it being a layered approach, and that's exactly what you guys are using here, is we have to figure out how do we make this layered approach work for the community to meet that financial need. We're trying to shorten up that gap of what is being contributed locally only, that's really on the backs of the utility ratepayers in the community. But at the same time, most of the time, you rarely can go to bid until you have that identified. It's a pretty big liability, and oftentimes you have to have that in place depending on the funding source. And so, again, we're trying to do this as quickly as we can. We want to get to a bidding point because at that point in time, we at least know the control of the cost. We're seeing huge inflation, all those things. So we're trying to shorten up that window as much as we can. But part of this is figuring out the financial picture and what that looks like. So working with, Maggie Berger and Spear Financial, when you use the SRF program, you're required to use what's called a municipal advisor. So that's what Spear Financial is for the utility and for the city, and Trainer. And again, you're working with that municipal advisor to really come up with what's the best financial picture, preparing pro formas, looking at utility rates, et cetera, to make sure that they're doing that really on the behalf of the bondholders from an SRF perspective to show that the utility is going to financially be able to meet their commitments from a bonding perspective. But again, that's part of the overall process. We're trying to there's a lot of balls in the air, if you will, that we're doing at the same time as design. There's all the financing and other things that are really part of this process as well too. So, there's a lot more going on than just simply designing a new wastewater plant.
At what point do we consider the county, did you have another question?
I do.
Can I ask one when you're done?
Sure.
Gary, my last question.
This is hypothetical. A town of 500 to 1,000 people, they would like to have another well, increase pressure, or maybe be able to expand some. What is the ballpark cost for a well? You have to give me something. Come on.
I hate these kind of questions. It depends, and that's an easy way of saying it, but I'll give you an example. If it's a shallow alluvial well, like you have, the city of Council Bluffs here has some shallow alluvial wells, along some of the, Missouri River alluvium. That's a much different equation than we did a project for the city of Walnut. I don't know if Walnut's in here today, but they have what's called the Jordan Aquifer is what their source of water is, and it's literally, it's a 2,500 foot deep well. There's a huge difference in cost of those two things. And so I can't give you, it's gonna be, this is the ballpark for a community, because that's $1 million project plus. It was over $1 million, and that was 4 or 5 years ago when it actually, I think, went through and got bid. And so in today's dollars, that's probably $1.5 million or more dollars. A shallow alluvial well, depending upon the size of the casing, how deep, all those kinds of things. Is it in floodplain? Do you have to berm it? Does it have a well house? There's all kinds of different pieces onto that. So it could be a few $100,000 to maybe a few $1 million, depending upon, again, depth of aquifer and capacities and all those kinds of things. Did I navigate that well?
Yeah, I expected that, but so a $50,000 well is completely out of the question.
Likely. To be honest with you, we did a well rehab project, which is essentially relining an existing well. It was about $80,000 here recently. And that was on a well that was about 150 feet deep. So again, you might be able to get for a few $100,000 depending upon the technology, integration, communication with the existing system tied into SCADA. There's all kinds of nuance there that I can't answer on a hypothetical like that, but I'd be happy to stick around and talk to you afterwards if you had more specifics, but.
The rationale for that question was a number of the cities on their project list was.
Source water.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just trying to get some kind of idea.
Yep. It can be very challenging, especially this part of the state. There's typically not a lot of shallow alluvial aquifers until you're real close to the river like you are here. There are some along like the Nishna and stuff too. We're doing some work for the city of Harlan right now and looking at drilling some additional wells, alluvial wells there. It's not a cheap proposition. It's become fairly expensive.
Okay. Anybody on the board have any questions for any of the team?
So I guess all the projects, some of them are more, what do you want to say, getting the technical assistance rather than the project, right?
Some of them, it's moving forward and they're in varying degrees of, I guess, shovel readiness, if that makes sense, yeah.
So Carter Lake, Crescent, and Trainer are the furthest along. They've got documents submitted to DNR right now, whereas the other three are earlier on in that planning process, needing to develop some of that specific engineering work.
And under the ARPA rules, anything to do with water or storm sewer, it's all those things are included.
Water, wastewater, stormwater are all very much and form really a bulk of what that money originally was intended for, along with broadband and a few other things. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Hauser, you have a question?
At what point do you consider this money spent? When the project's done, or when we cut a check to Michael so he can use it as leverage for the other loans and grants?
The reporting rules actually require, I believe, that those funds have to be tracked all the way through and actually expended on the project. And so
you're
even though they would maybe be allocated from the county down to the city, this is getting a bit gray, so I can't guarantee that this is the answer, but I believe that the answer is the city would then need to allocate those and spend those dollars out as well by the end of 2026.
And again, you do have, you do have those two deadlines, so the allocation has to be by the end of 2024.
Right, has to
And they
have
have
that
to be
commitment.
spent by end of 2026.
Okay.
Yeah, so for you at the county, you would have to identify that those funds have been allocated to these community projects, and then they would have to have spent the funds. And again, that you could show, like, I don't know how much they've spent at this point in time, but you've certainly put a decent amount of money into the planning and now the design work. And so from the perspective of where was that money spent to, it could be used and identified that essentially it was used to pay off portions of the work that's already been done. I think that would be something that you would be able to essentially work through.
March 1st of 2021.
What's that?
As long as it
Yes,
wasn't before
correct,
March
yeah.
1st.
We had also secured a $410,000 loan.
The planning design loan.
The planning and design loan in 2021 to kind of do these phases. It'll be put back into the project, but yeah, there was money to be spent up front that had to be done.
And real fast, just, so great point, the way that the SRF planning design loan program works is typically, so you've spent $400,000 in that planning and design related effort. And so what happens is that loan, that planning design loan, typically then gets rolled into whatever that long-term financing is. In this case, you may be able to use, say, like these ARPA dollars to essentially pay back that planning and design portion, so it doesn't have to get wrapped into that long-term financing, or at least a portion of it in this case. So that might be the advantage there from using those dollars to help essentially pay off all that upfront cost. And then really you could just think of it as those construction-related costs then are the things that are applicable and that are being paid for under that loan that the city is then taking out. So there's probably some work that can be done to show and justify and meet all the intents of the ARPA dollar requirements as it relates to some of that, essentially paying back some of that upfront cost that the city has incurred.
You think an invoice from like the communities will suffice them?
I think you're probably gonna have to have the documentation to show that it was actually spent.
Right.
And that's, I think that's the first money and having it spent, and I don't think, we should allocate anything on the treasury's report until that money is ready to be spent, because if we, hypothetically, 700 to trainer, if they don't get it spent, we don't wanna give that back to the treasury. So, it needs to be ready to go out when it goes out.
I'm sure there's a way contractors can collect so much upfront or whatever to make that work, but.
They like to get that mobilization number in quick.
So,
I think the documentation.
I did have one question. You talked about, obviously, we're up against this timeline, and I understand lead times of equipment, things like that. We're building out here, we're dealing with the same thing, but the permitting process, is that the bulk of the time that it's gonna take for your design, or is that?
No, there's a significant amount of design work. When you look at a lot of times these small communities, you just see a lagoon. It's like, well, how difficult is that? There's a lot of work that goes into, especially as you start getting into like enhanced lagoon processes like the LEMDA process is, and really what Crescent is looking at as well. There's a lot of work that happens back and forth with equipment suppliers, and the regulatory agencies, even before permitting happens, kind of some coordination to make that permitting process as smooth as can be.
I guess I wanna focus on the regulatory agencies, so ideally, if we could find a way to get them to speed their processes up, are you guys streamlined enough to make that go faster too? You said 12 months, give or take. If we can get that down to like 7-8 months, is that even realistic, if we can get the permitting stuff to go through?
I will say that there's more work that is going in to DNR right now. And so the concern that I would have, especially with all this BIL money and other things, you guys aren't the only county that's looking at making investments, cities as well. There's a lot of work going on right now. And so I can't say that I would anticipate the permitting process to be any less than it's been historically. Given the volume, the workload that they have, it may actually be longer. But I can't answer for exactly what their process is, but just based on past experience.
Your turn times are, pretty quick once you get that stuff.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, like if the regulatory side is figured out, your side of it, the engineer side, is quicker.
Well, it depends on how complex the project is. It can take quite a while. It can take a good amount of time. But yeah,
I'm asking these questions
I
because
can't-
when I go call
I
David
can't
Dawson, our senator, and say,
take
"Hey,
long
man,
periods of time and expect that my customers or my clients are going to want to keep us around. So yes, we have a commitment that we've made to our clients, just like I'm sure that the engineer for the city of Trainer has done the same thing. And so I just say that, you know, my team lives up to our commitments. I can't answer for others, but yeah.
So for order of magnitude, can you give a ballpark on Crescent timeline?
I think that our plan is, that we are supposed to be done with design early to mid next year with permitting, and anticipate that we would probably be bidding next summer, next fall, right in that time frame.
And then you think about a year or so to build the actual thing?
Probably 18 months. And that's simply because of material supply and availability. I mean, the other thing, Mr. Schultz, that you don't want to do from a contractor's perspective, the shorter you make my compliance as far as substantial and final completion in the market conditions we're in today, the higher my price goes. Because there's a lot of things that I don't have control over from a supply perspective.
Yeah.
And so if I have liquidated damages and a tight time frame, I'm gonna give you a much different number than if you give me a reasonable time frame to allocate my resources, my materials. There's a lot of projects out there, there's a shortage of labor, and so all those things, we typically have been extending our project schedules. Obviously, with something like this, we need to be cognizant of that 2026 date.
Right.
But I would really be cautious of having very tight construction schedules, because you will likely pay for that.
I guess where I'm going with this whole thing is when I go put pressure on our local representatives, our senators, the governor, to get these things streamlined through the agencies, I just wanna make sure that we're not, if I can get your permit next week, let's just say that normally would have taken you 2 months, I mean, are you guys prepared to handle that, is kind of my point.
Once we have the permit in hand, we're ready to bid at that point in time. So that's typically that final, I mean, we're doing all the work to prepare all the bidding documents, everything, that's really part of what that submission is, but all of the arrangements you make then for the public bidding process, we're doing those while that permit review is happening. And so once we get that permit review, it's really then we're ready to go with working with the utility or the city and their attorneys to set all the required chapter 26 bidding dates, et cetera, and getting that process started.
You're involved with just 2 of the communities that were up there, or?
At this point in time, we're just working, we're the engineer for Crescent.
Okay,
Not for Trainer.
okay.
We work with.
He's just
JEO.
here, and so I keep referencing.
Yeah, we work with JEO, and I've worked with JEO for the last
Okay.
30 years, so it's
So
been a good relationship.
Do all the potential projects have someone they're working with already?
Carter Lake.
I know that Carter Lake is working with a consultant as well, and then,
Okay.
Brent Yerson.
yeah. So the anticipation is that there are engineers for the other entities that are there. Certainly Minden has consultants they've worked with in the past, and then as far as McClellan, it probably doesn't have a lot of projects that come out all that often, but they would need to then retain the services of a consultant to do their work as well. Yep.
And then Supervisor Belt and Supervisor Schultz, I know at another meeting we were at, a point was brought up about, do these communities actually have the bandwidth to put these applications together? And so some discussion has happened within our coalition, and so we're actually looking at McClure doing either an amended contract to what we currently have with them, or a new contract that will be hopefully be put into place to offer that additional assistance in the actual grant writing. Now, Michael, you know, he's a pro at this, he's been doing it for a long time, but there are other communities that they do not have that bandwidth.
For instance, Hancock and
Yeah, I mean, plain and simple. And we can play a supplemental role, but we don't actually have the bandwidth to do it either, so.
We'll make that work somehow. Paula, do you have some closing comments next week?
Yes, so thank you again. I mean, we've had an extended period of time. We appreciate the flexibility in allowing this important information to be shared with you today. I would like to put some sort of resolution, at least draft something. We don't have anything official as it relates to the coalition or the ARPA funding from the county. So if you are amenable to that, I would really like to draft something, work with, you know, obviously Mr. Wilbur's office to get that finalized. I know Mitch stated he didn't want to put anything on the allocation. I get that, but I do think that we should have something official, because we don't have anything official other than, you know, our discussions.
Well, we need
captured
to,
in minutes.
Prove that the funds are secure on the county side of things, we'll make that happen. I shouldn't say that. We'll try to make that happen.
We'll present
as
that to
fast
that,
as we
right.
can.
I think my only reservation, I would just like to have a conversation with Crescent Mayor. Just make sure that if we're moving forward with this, that they're really truly prepared and that he's got that good.
And that is one of the reasons why we want to add that additional component onto McClure's contract, just because we need to provide them that extra assistance.
Yeah, I'm not saying that'll hold up the rest of them, I just.
Yeah, and I don't actually think it would be the mayor that would be probably have the oversight of that. It would probably be the city clerk, and she's extremely helpful, but again, the bandwidth does not exist, so we need to offer that assistance.
Can we help you by getting that set up?
1.5, and just
No,
don't
I
dictate
just,
where it
I'll
goes.
stop there, so
Give it, you know,
In one resolution.
in one resolution, say 1.5 is allocated by the board from ARPA funds to the group, and then don't put any specific projects in it or anything like that.
Correct.
And that way, if we get to into 2024, we'll find some of it.
And we will come to you each and every time application goes in, we will come to you, we will present and let you know kind of how everything's being stacked, how everything's progressing. I mean, that is something we've always intended to do, so it's not, that's part of our timeline and our schedule. It's already incorporated into that. I think the last thing I want to say is just, again, thank you to the Board of Supervisors, thank you to the Iowa West Foundation, all the individuals that have participated. This has been a really eye-opening and very beneficial process, and I know we're going to be successful with all of these components. The McClure team, you can obviously see why they were chosen to be our consultant. Their expertise is, top-notch and in connection. So I think this is good. I think it's good for the totality of the county and obviously our taxpayers. So we need to spend this money, and these are impactful projects.
Okay, Bethany, one last quick question for you. Is that lump sum
Resolution gonna suffice for you to make sure we get
hit the timeframe of September for those funds from the state?
It should work, right?
Yeah, I mean, what you
We'll
would have
find
is,
out
as part
at
of that,
point.
as part of that matrix, then the community would be then submitting, is, part of that is, how are you gonna pay for it? And if there's outside funding sources, you'd need to be able to identify that in there. And so certainly by that time frame, it's anticipated that that'll be done in September, and so it'll occur, essentially those submissions by the utilities will occur thereafter. And so if you were to take action in that amount of time, certainly that would be
Okay.
beneficial.
Can we just pin one of these 2 days?
Yeah, we can do that.
For the approval of the reso?
Yeah,
or-
I gotta go
yeah.
play Army for the next few weeks, so I'm out, but.
I am too, so I'd appreciate later in August.
Playing Army?
The 22nd or the 3rd?
So
Oh,
we're
I'm sorry, I'm looking at,
23rd
yeah,
and 30th?
Yeah, the 30th, would that be acceptable?
Yeah, we'll work with you on getting a resolution put together, and we'll have,
everything by legal counsel to make sure.
Yeah, I'll at least take a stab at drafting it, and then I typically just send it to Mr. Wilbur, and he red pins it, so.
So just one, these other entities that haven't contacted an engineering or consultant firm, if I contacted you today, are you backed up or?
It's a busy time, but I always tell everybody, we always have room for one more, right? And there's a
We would figure out how to make it happen.
And that's one of the things I've appreciated too. They're very responsive, so I mean, the communication is just ongoing and it's a quick turnaround, so that's been extremely pleasant.
Can I
We have-
clarify one
we have-
thing? You said there was more money coming in. It's not coming into the county, it'll be coming into the city?
I'm sorry.
You said there was more money coming in from,
Potential partner,
but it'll be coming into the city, not to the county.
Correct.
Correct.
We're making
I
some,
want to clarify that for the benefit of
yes, yep,
finance staff.
outside source from the county, certainly.
again, thank you so much. Thanks for allowing the time.
Yeah, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Did we get the copy of those slides there?
Yeah, I have it. Emailed to me.
Okay.
Any further questions, email us, call us. Thank you.
Okay, next up. Anybody wants to skate up, it's good. This next one is important.
And I'm going to bridge this conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about what we just talked about here, so.
Next up, we have Mr. Meehan, President and CEO of the Iowa Foundation. Update and discussion on the grant awards. You are.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about the grants in general, but because I want to bridge into from where we just were to one of the items on here. So Iowa West has been involved with the cities program for a decade or so. The whole reason for the cities program was to support economic development in rural Pottawatomie County. And I think it worked pretty well for a while. And then as funding became less available, as the projects that were known became kind of finished, the projects that were coming into us for cities projects became pretty small and not consequential in the way we wanted our projects to be consequential. And so when Supervisor Belt and Matt Wyant came to us and talked about how do we leverage the ARPA funds, it seemed like an excellent opportunity for us to rethink how we can get cities prepared to do bigger projects. We all know they have important work to do. These are critical projects if these cities are going, the communities in the county are going to be growing. Those are the things we wanted to help fund. And so essentially what we've done with our allocation is the board of the Iowa West Foundation has allocated $1.6 million to support and leverage county, state, federal funds for infrastructure projects. That is about this. We have not, like you were talking about, we have not designated it for any specific projects. It will essentially accelerate the city's projects for probably 3 to 5 years, and it will impact the city's projects. But we've had very low participation in cities for the last couple of years, and we're not doing the kind of work we want to do with that project. This allows us to support the kind of work we want to do. So we are prepared to, there are a lot of I's to dot and T's to cross, but we knew that the money may need to be allocated prior to our next grant cycle. So we have $1.6 million allocated. The expectation is that we will match the county's allocation up to $1.5 million. And then we have additional funds to finish the job that we thought we were starting with McClure, which is that at the end of this, the cities would have all these applications in hand. Well, what we all discovered is that there was a huge amount of research and background work and study that needed to be done first before these applications could be filed. And so we're prepared to help the county to also continue with McClure or someone else. I think Paula will be managing this, and I think Paula, as has said, is a very strong advocate for McClure continuing it. They know it. So we're prepared to match what the county does with your ARPA funds and also to support whatever you can help to continue to keep McClure on task. We haven't allocated it, but we have it set aside. And there are we don't even know, to Melvin, to your point, we're not quite sure who we're going to give the money to. We have a lot more flexibility in how we allocate funds, when we allocate funds, to whom we allocate funds, than you do with a lot of the public dollars. And so we're prepared to work with everybody involved to figure out how that might work. Any questions about that before I talk about the rest of the grant cycle?
So, support to leverage state and federal infrastructure funds, the 1.6.
Yes.
Okay.
We did not want to put a recipient or to be very specific because we aren't very specific until the county makes some decisions about how you want to approach these rural needs.
Right.
Any other questions about that?
So will the county need to identify by project for the Iowa West Foundation?
We're gonna have to talk about that.
Do whatever you want.
I
mean, that's a huge commitment that you're doing.
Yes, it is. We started this project with a fairly sizable commitment just to better understand what the rural communities need. And the rural communities don't have the resources or the capacity to develop large projects. And we have to address that first before we can start funding projects. And so now I think we have some exciting projects that we can fund that will actually allow these communities
to see the economic development that has been our goal all along. And participating with the county in that helps us leverage all these other dollars that we want to get. So every place you see on that local match, that's us. And we will figure out how it works in coordination with the county, in coordination with Paula and her team and McClure, to determine how we can allocate that. Matt Hinckus is in the back of the room. He's the one who makes the numbers come out right, and so we'll be working through how exactly that's going to work out to the best interest of everybody.
Well, we appreciate
Yeah.
Westport and everyone's doing this. I mean, it's really important. And it will go far, however we shake it out, but.
So briefly, for the rest of it, I think the document in your packet says 4 million. We had to reconfigure one of our allocations, so we're at 3.5. It's just something we're kind of sorting through some of the nuts and bolts of it. Some of you participated in our Imagine Hours where we went out to the community. We were in Oakland. We talked about what is it that you as citizens, as residents want to see in your community. One of the things that came through very loudly, every place we talked to was housing. And so we really gave a focus on housing with Anna Wim Housing is a new organization that's been coordinating with all the organizations that currently operate here to try to figure out how we can reduce and prevent homelessness and address it before we get to that point. It's the same thing with the metro area continuum of care, so we're looking at how to really address that.
How do you pronounce that?
Anna Wim.
Anna Wim.
Who runs that?
They're based in Des Moines. They're the largest supportive housing organization in the state of Iowa. We are part of the Omaha system, and it hasn't always worked in our favor. And so we decided we needed to connect with somebody who had the thorough understanding of the Iowa rules and how things and funding works in Iowa in order to make sure we're getting all that we need. And so this is a Des Moines-based organization that also works in Sioux City and some other communities across Iowa to look at how they can do supportive housing here.
So housing, when you were out even in a rural community?
Absolutely.
Was it,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't really primarily for homeless out there?
We did not hear the word homelessness very much. We heard affordable housing, workplace housing, better rental units, better, but all of this comes back to how do you maintain housing for people who are at risk? And so we're kind of trying to go a little bit upstream as opposed to just doing the emergency services. You'll see in the rural communities, Carson, Carter Lake, I'm going to back up a second. You will see Little Sioux Scout Ranch is another large contribution that's $500,000. We really want to develop the Lost Hills as a regional attraction. The county wants to see that too. We all benefit up and down western Iowa when the Lost Hills become a destination attraction. And so the Little Sioux Scout Ranch adds 6,000 wilderness acres. And it is very much in line with what the Boy Scouts had hoped would happen with the Little Sioux Scout Ranch. So Carson Volunteer Fire Department, the city of Carter Lake for Mabry Park, Food Bank of Iowa, that's not necessarily Pot County, but it's Adams, Audubon, Carroll, Taylor County, the surrounding areas that need some help with food banks. 4-County Fair Association. Thriving Family Alliance is throughout all of Pottawatomie County to make sure that children are getting the services that they need. Trainer Volunteer Fire Department, Underwood, and then Walnut all received grants. So all in all, it was about $3.5 million. A good chunk of that went to rural, I'm pleased to say. And the next round starts September 1st. Any questions?
I have one. What's a diaper bank?
Interestingly, a lot of new parents especially are not able to buy diapers. I'm sure they're very expensive.
It's ridiculous. It's like $20 for 36.
I paid $42 for 8 of them last night.
Yeah, it's insane, and the kid goes through 12 to 15 of them a day.
So it kind of none of us benefit when a kid has a dirty diaper. So it's just a way to make sure that parents have what they need.
The
daycares won't take them without.
We were growing up, they didn't have those.
I don't really wanna think about
No,
that,
I
Scott.
don't
No, I don't, but I know that there wasn't.
Well, and Susan made a good point that your daycare, you have to provide them to your daycare as well. The
Oh, yeah.
daycare doesn't cover them.
Mm.
You have to provide a tote that has, so you're an upfront cost, for instance, when my child goes to daycare here in 2 weeks, she will need I figured out about $110 worth of diapers in a thing that she may or may not grow out of before I get to use them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Brenda, that's a pretty impressive list, and
Thank you.
No, but I do wanna come and talk at some point on the project that I've talked about before. It's completely changed, so I just wanted to kind of share the conversation.
Great. Always open.
So then the city, you know, the city's program is still out there in addition to this?
So the cities was funded this year, and Matt can correct me if I'm making any mistakes, but the city's program was funded this year. As I said, it's not been very robust the last couple of years. We are taking a closer look to determine, is that the best use of our funds? It's just been diminishing. It started a long time ago. Everything needs to be looked at again periodically. I don't know what's gonna happen. I'm not gonna make any promises at all about the city's program going forward.
Okay.
But support for economic development in Potawatomi County is something we are gonna continue to do.
So these ones that were on here were done through the city's program? These, with Trainer and?
Oh, these are all, the volunteer fire departments?
Yeah,
That's a separate fund.
so none, there was
City's
no-
program was funded in the last cycle.
It was funded in the first cycle, which was the last cycle, yes.
Right. Was there any applications for city's funds then?
We only do it in one cycle.
Right.
It's once a year. And so we did have applications. Do you know off the top of your head who they were?
Not off the top of my head, but it was a relatively constrained amount compared to past years. It's been declining over time, which is why this new program with the RPCIC has been a new way to inject some vigor into how we work with rural communities.
Right.
You know, we're doing important things like graveling lots for county fairs. That's important, but it's not it's not gonna drive economic development.
Right.
I think some of it probably boils down to the bandwidth thing we talked about earlier. I mean, some of these city clerks are just, they're doing literally everything, and there's no way they have time to sit down and do a grant writing
Yep.
session, you know?
Very true.
Especially the amount of grants that are out there.
So I, maybe back to both of you on this question, you know, we talked about looking at possibly McClure helping out with some of this. I mean, when do you think that will come back? Or is the board gonna be involved in that conversation, or?
Paula is gonna put forward a recommendation, and I'm sure she'll talk to all of us.
Okay. Can you do
Absolutely.
that before that meeting in
Yes,
September?
yeah, I can make that work.
Does the city's fund still have an organization?
They are still affiliated with MAPPA. And so, you know, and we have worked through MAPPA. Everything has to be looked at again after a period of time. And just to make sure that we're doing it the best way it can be done. We have lots of conversations. We have not talked to the communities. We want to understand from the city clerks and the mayors what's working for you and what isn't working. We have not made any changes to cities. The only thing I'm telling you is we will be taking a close look at it to make sure that it's still the best way to address the needs. We are very happy with what's been going on with Advanced Southwest Iowa.
Thank you.
okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Call up.
Apologies to all of you behind us. This is kind of but good info. Thank you. Yes, I'm going to try.
Whether actually, the physical, what a one looks like.
Hey, you guys haven't talked to Steve about that?
Where's your water field?
How are you?
What's that?
No, this is.
It's right, it would be due west, it'd be northwest. right there. It's inside
Okay.
on that property.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next up, we have Maria Seek, our Public Health Administrator. Presentation on the Public Health Recognition Awards. Ms. Seek, you're up.
Good morning.
Morning.
So Mitch is pulling up a 5-minute video. You've probably seen it. It's shortened a little bit from what we used at our volunteer appreciation event in January. But the video is something that we submitted for our award applications. Let me just bring these up.
I can't open this file, Ted.
No worries.
So we submitted through for 2 national awards, one through the National Association of Counties and one through the National Association of County and City Health Officials. This is for our mass vaccination clinic efforts from December 2020 through May of 2021. During these, we held 38 different events. Up to 3,000 people came through a day. We distributed over 50,000 doses of vaccine for COVID-19 to approximately 30,000 residents. So when we submitted the application for these, we had to show how we were filling gaps in services, how we were addressing shared problems, and how we used good fiscal management. But we also was for quick and creative development of a successful response to health inequities due to COVID-19 with community collaboration, adaptability, and remarkable innovation. So we submitted these with the help of Brian Mainwaring, POV LLC, and titled them An Expression of Community. So while the leadership team,
Show that to those 2 ladies over there. They were a big part of it too.
so while the leadership team managed and coordinated the clinics, it was really due to the volunteers that helped with those. And the community collaboration pieces for that too. So through the support of the Board of Supervisors, we were able to better reach out to the community, and just you guys, your presence there really gave us that credibility that we needed for that community support. So we wanted to say thank you to the board and our elected officials, to the volunteers, communities, the organizations that donated their time and their resources to come help make these events successful. With that, we were able to reach our community with a lot of positive attitude and get it opened back up for everybody and just reduce those disparities and make that vaccine accessible. So the volunteers had about 90% of our staff at those was volunteer time. So the NACCHO Award is Innovative Award, and that was given to us at the annual conference in Atlanta, Georgia. We had 3 people go down and attend that. And we also received a grant through the National Association of County and City Health Officials. And there were 24 health departments that won awards through them. So these were the pretty big health departments, a lot from California, from New York. And so we just felt like we were very successful to be in that room and receive an innovative award from them. Melvin attended the NACCHO Award in Denver, the luncheon there at their annual conference where we were recognized in July as well for that one. And that is the Achievement Award. So I apologize that the video did not load.
Where is that video?
It's online.
Get to YouTube or something.
We can send you a link to it so that you can view them, because it's they stacked it with the other health departments that were awarded. I think that was, it's one of the best things when you look down through those list of health departments that were awarded and you see, Los Angeles, New York City, Boulder, Colorado, all those high population centers, and right there in the middle of that mix is Potawatomi County, Iowa, and with Brian's write-up, and I mean, everybody participated in it. Jake, the expression of community, I mean, that quote came from Jake Head. So it was a real team effort, and being able to submit for these worked out really nice.
Can you get that to Craig Carlson, that link?
Craig,
Or
yeah.
somebody working with it on that?
Mm-hmm. He cut down the video to 5 minutes for us. We put him right to work on his second day. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Well, hopefully, we don't ever have to do that again, but you never know. I'm talking about as far as the vaccination clinic, that was, it was well run, that's for sure.
I think about the purpose that we've accomplished though, like, I hope we never do too, but I mean, should something happen, I mean, we've got a pretty good blueprint how it needs to go.
Yeah. I mean, we were lucky to have an American Center, in the city to allow us to partner with that, set communities. I remember exactly how many days it was. Might have been after one, but
Yeah.
I see a lot of people.
I took a picture of the program. That's the best I can do.
What's that?
I just took a picture of the program.
Thanks, Brandon.
Wanted to
Thanks,
bring
Paula.
Thank you.
Wanted to bring one, but, they didn't have one available.
We brought Brittany up though, and can we pause really quick and have you four come down and we'll take a photo with the awards?
She is the official public health photographer.
Yes. Yeah, you guys wanna be in the middle?
So we just wanted to say thank you for being a part of the public health team.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Perfect, guys. We'll do one more. Perfect. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Where are you gonna put those up at?
No, is the board gonna put this up at?
We'll have to.
I tried hanging something in here before and Melvin took it down, so I don't know.
He is responsible for the courthouse at the correction of the board.
This one says NACO on it, so I think they'll
As
hang
long
it
as it
up
doesn't paint the
somewhere.
border pink.
Yeah.
You know, put it in some sort of, obvious place.
We'll get it fixed.
We were gonna take the other one and hang it down at the health department.
Okay, awesome. I'll get that.
So I think the last time we got an award through NACO was 2013.
Yeah, what was that?
It was something to do with like the sheriff's department or communication or something like that.
I can't remember. No.
Thanks, Maria, well done.
Yeah. Sorry, John.
Okay, next up, item F, John Rasmussen, the engineer, Tina Trientos, operations administrator. This is discussion decision to approve and authorize the board to sign resolution 55-2022, approval of traffic safety improvement program application for temporary traffic signals. John, you are up.
I'm on the agenda because I had one that wasn't viable, so I struck mine off the agenda. So Tina's is moving ahead, so I'll let her explain the resolution is.
Okay, so the resolution is to put in for some temporary traffic signals. And, the key piece to this is it would remove the maintenance personnel from doing flagging operations in our work zones.
Say that again.
It would remove the maintenance personnel from doing the flagging operations in work zones.
Okay.
So for their safety, and then the other piece would, efficiency if they're doing the labor work on the job site. So they're not flagging, it's gonna move the project along a lot quicker. So we're putting in for, one system, which comes with 4 carts in that. The enclosed trailer, it has solar charging components on there, and then motion detection, so that it wouldn't be running at all times. It would sense the car coming up and then trigger the device to keep moving forward. We received 2 quotes back. One of them was $51,300 and the other one was $64,000. We're putting in for 100% from the DOT. We would do no match. And it looks like the ones that were submitted last year were all granted at that 100% contributions.
So you can set the time, between and all that as far as.
So if you do like an overnight closure, you could set the time. It does have a 5 to 7 day charge on it, but it's solar. And then, especially in rural communities, it'll detect the car so many feet ahead and then trigger that sign to go, so it's not running consistently.
When you guys get this, I'm gonna make a kind of comment. There's one on North Broadway right now that just makes people want to commit crimes because of how ridiculous it is. And I say that because there's not, I don't know if the timer's off, I'm not sure how that thing works, but I mean, someone could sit there at a light with 0 cars coming for an extended period of time. And I guess all I care is that you get the timing of this thing set up so that we're not doing that.
I think
Creating traffic that runs all the way down,
you spec the motion sensor. I think there's a motion sensor that'll trip the light, so one side or the other, if there's nobody there,
So trigger
it's gonna read
timer
the
then.
car,
Yeah.
move that car.
Well, I think the weird thing with that one is that, road that comes in at the,
Yeah, Spencer.
is that what that is,
Yeah,
Spencer?
Spencer and North Broadway. And
Where that one comes in, cause it's really not on a light, is it?
Yeah, it's on a light.
It is also for Spencer too? So it's a 3-way, okay.
I don't go that way anymore.
no, anyway.
What, so is that, does that city own that system, or is that something can you rent these?
You can rent them, yeah. Availability's been tough when we wanted them.
I think that was the contractor. I don't think that's the city.
Okay,
I think whoever they hired to do the work is doing that.
they sub that out.
Yeah, I think so.
So, you end up with
Councilman, you're gonna blow my phone up now.
four sets of lights then?
So the set she applied for it's 4, you need one on the side and one above, or you need one on both sides. So there's gotta be a redundant light, so that's why it's 4. These are real small, so they fit on our shoulders. I think they're maybe just 30 inches wide or something, so
Oh, really?
they work on our more narrow roads. So it won't be a whole trailer with that overhead, it'll just be on each side of the road.
Oh, okay. Sitting on just near the shoulder. Have you ever seen,
I haven't seen them in the county around here.
anywhere like that?
Well, we'll have one here pretty soon.
Well, maybe.
I
What's
think
the
you'll
cost?
start to see them around Iowa a lot
64,000.
more.
Tell them what the DOT about.
But
Yeah, that's what I
It's
was
gonna
gonna
be
say.
fully funded, hopefully fully funded with no match, like you
Right.
said.
Right. Well, no, I understand. But I mean, we haven't got, the resolution doesn't guarantee that the DOT's gonna give it to us.
Yeah, I think you'll start to see them around Iowa a lot more. The DOT just purchased 20 of them for their use, and then some other counties and cities are putting in for these grants and picking up on them. I would say if we don't get the grant, I would probably recommend to put it into one of our budgets in the moving years, just because it is important. You know.
Probably our most dangerous job is
Yeah.
that flagger.
Right. Okay.
What's the pleasure?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Any other discussion for John or Tina? All right, we have a motion and a second. Ms. Flanagan, you call the roll, please.
Chairman Wickman.
Aye.
Supervisors Belt. Groby.
Yes.
Schultz.
Aye.
Shay, is he on the phone?
Ryan, are you still on there?
Yes.
I don't know if he's still around.
So that's,
Are you guys busy? Can you stick around for about 10, 15 minutes? Sure. Talk to both of you real quick.
Okay, moving on, our next thing is Becky Lenahan, the Tax and Finance Officer in the Auditor's Office, discussion decision
To approve and authorize the board to sign resolution 51-2022. It's a resolution for transfer of the mental health fund to the mental health direct expenses fund.
This is very confusing and, they are closing the Fund 10, or we're not using it anymore. Been directed to move all of the direct expenses to Fund 9. The payroll comes out of there, and then we bill the region quarterly. This $14,093.17 came in through delinquent taxes. DHS and whoever came up with this process
The
has,
legislature did.
okay, forgotten to take that into account, that there was going to be delinquent tax apportioning to go into that fund when they said close it out on June 30th. So this might not be the last time that we do this transfer if we get more funds in there. And then we will just credit the region on their quarterly payment.
So that's the only one we're talking about today is 14,000?
Yes, that's all that's in there at this moment.
Okay.
Motion approved. A second. This is, we're gonna do a resolution this time for this.
Yeah, you do a fund transfer, right?
This should take care of that we're done with that. It'll zero it out, right?
Not
Yeah, well,
necessarily.
zero out now, but if there's
If
more
there's any
delinquent
more
taxes.
delinquent taxes that are apportioned into Fund 10, then we'll have to do another transfer into Fund 9.
So that's a legislative thing that needs to get taken care of in the next session.
Well, it'd probably be more of a technical thing that
It's just something that they didn't think about when they did
the
pass the.
Department of Revenue, Department of
But they want it done
Management,
by
state
resolution.
auditors.
Yeah, I have to transfer the funds, I can't.
Okay. Did you,
Do it any other
Justin,
way.
you made that? Scott, you seconded it?
Yep.
Okay, we have a motion and a
Thank you.
second
On resolution.
on resolution 51-2022. Mr. Hauser, will you call the roll, please?
Chairman Wick,
Aye.
Supervisors Belt, Groby, Schultz. Is Shay still there?
I think so.
Aye.
Oh, he is. Okay.
Becky, since I have you, will you be making any comments on Fund 9?
Comments on Fund 9?
Do we have that straightened out yet, Nick? Fund 9, there's 353,000 in there, and that was for general relief, I believe. No. I think Fund 9 was supposed to be coming back to us too, is that right?
No, Fund 9 is the new, it's the new fund that we are using for the mental health direct expenses fund. We zeroed everything out of there probably a couple of years ago, when it had that 771,000 in there.
That was case management at the time? No.
We haven't received any state funds yet, right?
They have, the region has deposited money into Fund 9, yes. To cover the payroll for the first quarter.
Okay, I'll get it sort of straightened out for me.
Okay.
There's just something that isn't right.
If we can run reports or something, or you can stop by.
Okay. All right.
So, to his question, when the state sends us is it quarterly they're paying us?
The region is paying us.
But this region's getting it from the state. Is that quarterly?
Yes.
Okay. But I thought they're gonna prepay us, right?
That's
So
why there's
That's the
funds in
quarter
there.
ahead.
Right.
Okay.
I just thought I had a conversation with Suzanne or Chris Gardner that 353 in Fund 9 is the county funds, not the region funds. But I'll get that confirmed from them, or maybe I've got it wrong, but it's not that big of a deal right now.
Okay.
But we're not moving on anything then. All right, moving on. Any other questions for Jason?
think it seemed like it'd be a bigger number than that, but they would have gave us.
Next up, Becky, you're still up. This is Resolution 52-2022, appointing the UMB Bank of West Des Moines to serve as a paying agent and authorizing the execution of the agreement. This is referring to the bond.
The 2022 series, general obligation bond. And it's just appointing the registrar and paying agent UMB Bank and authorizing the issuance of the notes.
Motion to approve.
A second.
Anybody have any questions for Becky on this, or Mitch? We have a motion and a second. Mr. Hauser, call the roll, please.
Chairman Wickman. Aye. Supervisors Belt. Aye. Groby.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
Shay.
Aye.
All right.
Sometimes they forget to unmute.
Last thing, anybody, I don't think anybody has signed the public comment page. All right, so the last thing is adjournment. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
We are adjourned.